to Kamwala, talk to Indian shops.
Yeah.
You got Mandevu and so forth.
Yeah.
You ask people, when are you going to formalize employment? When employees will feel they're part of the business and they're growing your business well, they'll say, well, when we reach this level of growth, when we become like Zanako and so forth. Is there a stage where a company, a business, may begin to look at HR issues as a formal thing and not informal?
HR issues begin from the onset, from the recruitment stage, because once you make an error in terms of recruitment, it will cost you a great deal in terms of, having to let people go because they're not performing. So from the recruitment stage, which means you're bringing in people that are going to run that business, and you're looking at profitability at the end of the day. So the business people, whether they're small businesses or your large conglomerates, need to look at HR from a serious perspective from the recruitment process. After the recruitment process, we're obviously looking at issues of managing performance and training and developing the same employees. But at the same time, we need to learn to, for example, compensate or motivate the same employees in order to match with what they're bringing in terms of their performance within the organization. So it starts from the onset, from the groundwork.
Absolutely. Is there any link really between business failure, success, and human resource issues?
There is a direct link between business failure and recruitment issues, as you put it. Like I mentioned earlier, people drive the business. And so if you get it wrong from the initial stage, then it's very difficult for you to correct it at a later stage. So this is why I always emphasize the fact that recruitment is a process that must be taken seriously. You cannot just take people haphazardly and hope that you can develop them. There's nothing wrong with developing them in the process, but you need to make sure that you've got the people with the right qualifications, with the right experience, and with the right attitude. At times, it's not the experience that matters, but it's the right attitude and the drive. You need to be able to get people who are able to look at your business as though it was theirs. And you can always pick these things during an interview process. So this is why I always emphasize that the recruitment process needs to be done by people who are qualified to do that in terms of looking at the behavioral side of an individual and also the technical side of the individual. So the people that you bring into your business can either make or break you.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see the questions that are there now. Let's maybe just attend to 4 questions and then we accommodate many more. Miyanda, what advice do you give to companies that do not have HR departments? That's from Sharks. So take note of that question. We shall take 2 more. How can we change the current trend of organizations advertising only for formality? Okay, MNC, MBA, 13, okay. I think that those companies, that,
yes,
you got it.
Yes,
yeah?
I got that question, true.
You remember the 2 questions so far?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's see if you can remember the 4th one, then we stop it there. Workers' compensation funds, HR is lazy and unprofessional. How can they call applicants for aptitude tests? Why not shortlist those with related skills? I doubt if they have good candidates. There's an advert, I saw it, by the Workers' Compensation Fund where everybody will really go through
an aptitude test.
Yeah, so maybe talk through those three questions.
Okay, the first question, if I remember correctly, says, what about companies that don't have a human resource department? What do they do? Where do they get this expertise? I think this is where human resource consultancy companies come in terms of assist in that area, because we don't just assist in terms of recruitment. We also cover things like training and development. We can also assist you in terms of developing a performance management system. We can also help you in terms of developing job descriptions, designing job specifications, carrying out a job grading or job evaluation system. I know the question will probably be, it's expensive to get a human resource consultant to come in. It really depends on how what sort of work that needs to be done and how you negotiate with a human resource consultant. Because again, it depends on the amount of work that needs to be done and the size of the organization. So you can either outsource, or as the environment is changing now, every individual manager, regardless of which department you're in, must have an HR incline within you, because you've got people that you're managing within your department. So I think it makes a lot of sense for each manager within that organization that doesn't have an HR department to, try and get information on how to run an HR, or the HR side of the business. The second question was, what happens to companies that advertise as a formality?
Yeah.
I think most companies that put adverts in the paper, it's really not a formality. Of course, there are those companies that will do it as a formality. because they've already identified somebody, maybe via headhunting, because you know that you can recruit somebody without actually doing an advert by headhunting. But what
But even then, we have done headhunting before at Zambia State Insurance Corporation, I know, but even then we still subject the individual to an interview.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
We have had cases where the person who headhunted was beaten.
Absolutely, yeah. It's true. I think to get the mathematics right, you will advertise in the paper so that you broaden your scope. You will also headhunt depending on where, if you know where to find the people, but you've got to take them through the same, interview process. If they have to go for a psychometric test, depending on the position that you're looking at, you've got to take them through the same psychometric test. But advertising is expensive. I cannot see a company spending 5 million or 10 million on an advert for formality's sake. I mean, the financial department in that organization would have an issue with that. So most of the jobs that are advertised in the newspaper are genuine. There are times, though, when an advert will come out and then the company decides to put it on hold. So it might be on hold just for that particular moment, but a company cannot spend those kind of resources just as a formality.
Workman's capacity, that's about the aptitude test.
The question was, why can't they just take people that are qualified? I think every single company has got their own recruitment policy, and I would want to believe that that is part of the recruitment policy, to take people through an aptitude test. I think if you look at most of the financial institutions, you do have to go through an aptitude test before you are shortlisted into maybe first and second or third interview. So it really depends on the recruitment policy that a company decides to take on.
Maybe let's talk about employing relatives and friends. Are there any dangers for that in your business? We're talking about people who run their own businesses. Let's look at the side of employing a relative, a brother, a sister, and so forth. What are the cons and pros?
Okay, the coin is two-sided, the way I look at it. I think history has shown us that there are companies that have succeeded extremely well that are run by families. For example, the father starts off the business, hands over to the son, and the sister is the marketing manager. It really depends on how professional that organization is. But what I find is the major problem when we recruit our relatives is we don't treat them as professionals. For example, if I decide to take my niece as an accountant, she's a qualified accountant, full ACCA, and has done the complete qualification. And when she starts working for me, and because I'm keeping her at my home, I tend to pay her less than what I'm supposed to pay the market rate, because my assumption is I'm keeping her, I'm feeding her, I'm clothing her. So that is one of the major problems, that we then don't look after them as employees. The other side of the coin is where you recruit your son or your daughter, and they come in and they don't work according to the standards that you have set for everybody else. And it makes it difficult for another manager to reprimand that child, because most of the times the child will say, well, this is my father's company. So you've got to look at it from a professional perspective. If you're going to employ relatives, then you've got to maintain a certain level of professionalism. If you cannot maintain professionalism, then it's really not advisable to go that route, because you will certainly have problems.
Now, is there a kind of mindset or culture we ought to develop among the Zambian businesses with respect to issues of enterprise development and HR people?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said earlier in the interview, people are what I consider, and I could be speaking from an HR perspective, but I consider people to be the biggest asset in any organization. I know some people look at their vehicles as the most important asset in the organization. For example, if a driver has an accident and he calls the office to say, I've had an accident, the first question is normally, is the car okay? Before the question is asked on whether the person is fine or not. So we need to develop not just the people that we employ in terms of training and developing them. We also need to expect them to perform according to the standards that we set, and to motivate them. I'm going to use the word motivate as opposed to paying, because when you talk about paying, you're looking at just the monetary aspect of motivating an individual. I'm going to look at motivation in terms of recognition, because it comes in different forums. It can be motivation, it can be promotion, it comes in a different way. So I think there needs to be a bit more focus on the people that we have in our businesses. Like I said, it can either make or break you, the people that you have. They can sabotage your business if you don't look after them, the way, based according to standards that are set. But then again, we expect that the employees must perform based on what I expect.
Okay.